お願いします。
お願いします。
And let's start here in Zazen, and we're going to emphasize some things and take a certain approach, rather than the general Zazen. So becoming aware of the sensation of the ground, pressure of ground. So you can weight underside is a good starting point. Settling everything down while keeping the body structure open and bright. Feel the continuous pressure or support of the ground. Releasing the abdomen helps the body become more transparent, so the ground force can move further and cleaner through. And just notice how much you can allow that ground support to move up through the body. Each out breath is another chance to release tension, so we become less dense, less tight, less dense. Each in breath is another opportunity to become more spacious. Gradually allowing more and more of that ground support, that ground pressure, that ground force to move further and further up through the body. And then with whatever level of experience we have with that, try to stay with that as we slowly come up. At the very least, notice when we pull away from that support or that connection or that moving pressure up. What's helpful again is keeping weight underside so we don't move away from it too fast and lose the connection. We keep hanging, keep dropping, keep settling, so that continual rising force, rising support, we never leave it, we never shirk away from it. So taking your time to slowly come up. So it's more down, we're downing, settling. It's like we're still hanging or dropping even as we appear to be moving up. So that releasing down actually forces us up. And try to maintain that in our standing. And then see how much you've retained or restarting that process, giving ourselves over to the ground so the ground can give back, and letting that process open up skeletal structure. So it's a continual process of settling or weight underside, or releasing down, settling, so that we become emptied, open. And then the more open and empty we become, the more support we can allow in, the more we become aligned for ourselves. It happens to us, aligned from the ground up. So that's kind of the yin yang connection combination. Become more and more empty, become more and more filled. More and more empty to be more and more supported. So hanging out, weight through the feet, release the abdomen, hang the hips, lower back is flat. It's important because this is one of the junctures where we can cut things off, where that ground force cannot get through, the ground path gets kinked here or stopped there. So that's a very important juncture there. It's a big one. Every joint, every place is important, but this is a big roadblock for everybody. So standing or hanging out, really release the abdomen, torso and abdomen. Breathe in, really let it expand. Like not making it expand muscularly, but just really releasing, letting it open and expand as you breathe in. And let it retrace however it will naturally retrace as you breathe out. Okay, now we're going to create a little bit of an active pressure in the abdomen. And it's easiest to start with in front here. You give a little bit of pressure here. So you can imagine and feel it's like an air ball. A little bit of pressure there. A little bit of gentle tautness. Figuratively speaking, like creating this ball of pressure, this ball of air. And again, make sure we're hanging, lower back flat, knees bent. We're going to send that pressured ball, that pressurized ball, that ball of air around the torso, around the circumference of the torso. And that's going to have us do hip circles. We're not going to do the hip circles. We're going to be hip circled as I send that intentional ball of pressure around. That pressure is pushing my body. It's opening the body as it goes around. So that pressure, it's like a massage internally, stretching the tissue, opening the body as I send that pressurized ball around. So at first, I tend to move our body as we try to intend this. But once you really get into it, you are moved by that rolling pressure. That's moving through your body, around your body, moving your body, and you get a very nice, therapeutic, pleasant opening and stretching of the tissues. Sending that, and you can keep that pressure even when throughout breathing in and out. That's an intentional, just like it's no different than sticking your stomach out, but we're doing that in a more precise and moving way. And so I'm not having to use my muscles, so to speak, to do the hip circles. I'm not doing hip circles per se. I'm intentionally moving that intentional pressurized ball. It moves me and also literally massages me from the inside out. And of course, sticking your stomach out, that's kind of a muscular thing. So if we're doing that a little bit hard muscularly, back off on the muscle efforting and just replace it with intention and feeling. So it becomes less and less a physical muscular thing you're doing, and you're just placing that there with your intention. So you can relax more and more and more. Of course, this takes practice, but eventually you can relax more and more and more and totally back off muscularly. And it's just the direction and placement of intention, poof, creates that pressure, creates that ball. Of course, send it the other way too. Don't move until it starts to move you the other way. Okay, now as we come back to vertical center here, keep it. There'll probably be maybe a little bit more generalized. But this gentle pressure you have right now is an important internal training. This is the beginning of filling our core with ki or qi. It's directing the mind, the breath, energy into our core, into the hara or into the dantian in Chinese. And eventually, again, you can back off on the physical doing, and it's just there filling. It's just filled.
And is it like I'm wondering about, because I'm riding the line of like reducing the muscular, does the tautness remain, do you think, at the fascial layer then?
It's more, yes, it's not a hard muscular tension or trying. So it becomes a little bit, so it's more of a diffuse and general tautness. So that's going to be, yes, activating the fascia. That's what we want. More fascia oriented than muscle. Absolutely. And we hang out, and the more we can release and relax, the more we can allow that tautness to increase or just stay strong and dynamic. But it's good if you can get away from a muscular feeling quality and more of a fascial opening or stretching. So that would be excellent. And we eventually keep it by a certain kind of relaxing more. As I release and relax, it encourages it and allows it. Now, this pressure is what can literally drive everything we do. Well, we did a very simple movement. That, and if you have a feeling of that moving you, and some people, if they don't at first, they might not get it at first. But eventually, that is moving me around. I'm not moving me. That will be what drives everything. Walking, moving, rolling, which we might do in a few minutes. So I'm now doing things by this nice plump fullness, openness, Michelin man-ness, Pillsbury doughboy-ness. The importance of that is that means I'm not doing anything like this. I'm not doing anything like this. I'm not having to think of, okay, it's you and me clashing, which one's going to win, which one's going to break the other. I'm just moving along, doing my thing, and just getting better and better at doing this very interesting and pleasant feeling thing. You get better and better doing that, better and better doing it, and keeping it, better and better and doing it in movement, better and better in doing it, doing an actual so-called technique. Let me give you an example. Let's say I'm doing Nikyo here. Actually, all the way to getting here eventually can be motorized by this. I've used the term before, steam power. So this is the steam engine. And steam power, that is what supports me and makes me walk. But let's forget about getting there, because that's a little bit more meticulous. I'm already at Nikyo. Of course, at Nikyo, how do you apply more pressure? Well, you can bend or bow, you can drop those elbows, squeeze your hands, small circles, hopefully, some good technique there, right? That's normally mechanically how we do it. All that can be transcended. You don't lose those things, but they'll happen for you. All I have to do is keep pumping the steam engine, expand this or direct that pressurized ball. So I'm going to do the Nikyo with the same process of what we just did with hip circles. It's already on very strong. Of course, martially, what that means is they're not finding all that muscular articulation and source from the muscles that they can instinctually release without even resist, without even trying. They'll just resist totally naturally and normally. And also they can find the source of that power and either fight against it if they're strong or pull away from that source of power. So my arms, and so they'll either push back into the arms or pull away from the arms, and they slipped away from my control, locus of control. So just like all Aikido techniques, they can't as readily source where the power is coming from and relate to the power. Instinctually, they can't understand it, they can't relate to it, they can't deal with it. So I'm increasing this pressure just by expanding this, increasing this. Literally, this can be closing my fingers. Literally, it can be opening my fingers. So Nikyo is happening from this, on a very simple, basic level. It's coming from center rather than anywhere else. It's coming from center, to put it in a really simple way. But it becomes more penetrative into and through them as well. So it's very key on the level of key. It's not just physically being more harder to find and more globally sourced rather than one tight place, one narrow, tight place, the muscles, it becomes more globally sourced. So that's an advantage in itself. And also it becomes more penetrative energetically, intentionally. Ikkyo, rather than doing this or even doing it better with the hips and legs, I do it through a intentional vectoring of that pressure. And the pressure does it for me. So yeah, try that. So you can get a sense of that you're steam powered rather than muscularly driving everything. You're steam powered, this expanding pressure, this expanding fullness drives everything. Also, martially, let's go the other way. If they're able to resist or able to attack you, I go, well, let's go back to this Nikyo shape. Let's say for whatever reason, they're able to lurch through me or push through me. If I'm doing this muscularly, just like, again, the oak tree that eventually breaks, right? If they're strong enough to break through, I break here, or maybe I slip here and this is exposed, or this break they break my structure. If I am this ball, become more and more this pressurized ball, more and more this emanating sphere, and if it impinges in this direction, I moved as a sphere. Or let's say they push right through, they roll off me like a ball rolls off another ball. They roll, even if I supposedly apparently break structure, I can still keep this. So
Yeah.
One ball rolling off another ball. Yes.
Well, like, so it's occurring to me, so this is maybe a different level of understanding of putting on the shape. Because for me anyway, that idea of the shape on before, that felt as if it came from here. That somehow I was organizing intent or will. This explanation, what I'm feeling like in this sort of, having it on, is that I'm issuing a shape that's really solidly about here. And that changes the connection, changes the vector, but it's not that my mind's not part of it, but I feel it as a hara-centric phenomenon, and can feel that sense of how I can, if it's an air bubble, it's a pressurized bubble, I can bleed, I can ooze the bubble this way or this, like you've talked before about like the water going around things, and just, if you hit someone's structure, you just kind of go around it. Well, this feels like it would just flow around whatever it finds.
So yes, it's a continual emanation, expansion, radiating out continually. It's continuous outward pressure.
And it's not like I can see, even if my attention vector is somewhere over here, it's a global movement. So how do you contest that? Like there's no linear point, even with the connection points. That's what it's like. If I imagine a person, like, this is all hypothetical right now, but
excellent.
Yeah.
So yes, another way of putting that is that you are every direction. So if they pull or resist that way, you already have a vector that way, because you're a circle emanating out globally. If they go that way, either resist or go that way, you're already emanating that way.
So nothing changes, it just continues.
It continues. So let's say,
or sorry, it does change, but you don't have to do a new thing. You're just doing a thing.
I don't have to do a new thing. I don't have to add, oh, I better follow them. I better chase after them. I better add a new vector. You have that vector already on. So you don't have to do anything new.
Yeah. Okay. So
I have to move, because let's say they jerk over there, but instead of them jerking over there and I have to catch up to them, they jerk over there. I'm already moving there already.
Yeah. No,
moving there.
I'm having a strong memory, way back when we were on the mats, like how quickly it would be you would fill the gaps, like I can't remember a specific technique, but going through that with that opening, you can't help but fill it.
It's already filled.
Yeah. And at the time, I just remember wondering a bit, like, how is that possible? Like, how, like instantaneously.
Yeah, because it's already on.
Yeah.
It's already there. It's already there and there and there.
Yeah.
That's like the globalness or the sphere. So that's totally different than being fast. Okay, I got them here and then they jerk over there. I'm really fast, so I'll fill in the space real quick or fall in real quick.
Mhm.
This is a completely different technology.
Yeah.
And so it's mind-based, energy-based, rather than being physically based, technically based. A person can be very athletic, very agile, very quick, good reflexes, fast reflexes. That's where a lot of people are training. And it's fun and it's interesting, especially as long as you got good physicality and you got all those neurons firing.
Mhm.
Great. But this is totally different technology.
Yeah. Because, yeah, I mean, the sense when we were doing it a little bit earlier, like in the last Aikido class, when it kind of cut off, you're having us walk and then think to go in a different direction. That it feels like it sets you up to be such more responsive than, because I guess because that was the last class, I had a sense of that, but it's not the same as this.
We're going a little bit deeper with it
Yeah.
now because of your questions and your delving, your inquiring. So we're taking it a little bit further, a little bit deeper, and maybe I might say a little bit more, bringing the energetic and the physical more strongly together rather than just being intentional. We're really suturing the two together.
Mhm.
Let's play with going into Minucci and starting very small. Maybe we won't even go into full Minucci because, again, just like whenever we're working on a particular process or principle, we're not focusing right now on technique and everything being where it's supposed to be. If we get to a full Minucci, great, but notice if and when you lose it, how far you can get it. So again, hanging out helps everything, or that releasing down, weight under side, relaxing down. So the pressure from the ground can find us, allow that to accumulate and generate here. And take that feeling of expansiveness, fullness into quasi Minucci. And try to source the movement from this pressurized expansion. And have the arms be the equivalent of the belly, that they're also expanded, pressurized. Eventually that happens more and more purely, that this becomes just as empty and then filled as what we're feeling here. So we're working our way through the body. So that's, again, the cultivation of the body. In Tai Chi, we talk about emptying the body, softening the body. So it can be filled with this steam pressure, filled with this emptiness. And then once this becomes more global, more full, I find it corrects my lower back for me. Of course, the front is a little bit easier to relate to at first, or more accessible at first. Poof, makes the belly bigger. But once it becomes more complete, more full, truly omnidirectional, it does the same thing for the lower back. So it helps to straighten and fill the lower back. So it makes me one piece. So it's not me mechanically, okay, drop the hips and straighten lower back. So upper body work. It makes me complete like a ball. I'm pressurized into that shape. I'm pressurized into that feeling of this one unit. And eventually you can bring that to your peripherals. So that when you touch someone, whether it be in push hands and Tai Chi, or I'm doing Ikkyo way out here, all this power, all this weight and power can arrive right to your fingertips. Eventually you mobilize your mass, entire mass. And that can only happen once, so this pressurization filling stretches the fascia web. And so this concentrated power, pressure, eventually can be sent anywhere through the fascia system, fascia web, to any point, fingertips, one little finger, And then eventually you can have your full power going to any particular point. Let's take that into Sayuendo. And again, not worrying about speed, coming totally from the feeling. So being motivated from the internal rather than externally doing the movement. Being motivated from the internal experience, and that will inform our movement and shape. Not worried about getting full shape of Sayuendo. That may or may not occur. It's the inner to the outer process that we're developing. And you might notice, like, for example, I really am experiencing, it may not always go all the way out to your peripherals, but I'm really experiencing it keeps my elbows out rather than in, right? Keeps my elbows literally pressurized out or pressed out. So rather than me stretching out and stretching from the shoulder, stretching out, literally my elbows are being pressed out away from me because my belly is being pressed out away from me, and that extends out further. My elbows are being pressed away from me, creating the shape from the inside out. Eventually that will get to the fingers as well. And then eventually that all the things that we mechanically do, for example, oh, I can let those shoulders really rest. They can really relax down and rest because I'm no longer doing it with that area. I'm no longer using those muscles to do it. I'm pressurized, filled into that shape rather than lifting myself into that shape. I'm pressurized into that shape. And so all of a sudden, eventually, those muscles can just start to realize, oh, okay, I can actually let go. I can really, truly let go because it's happening for me. I don't have to do it anymore. Those are the muscles talking, right? So those shoulders, all of a sudden the shoulders went, oof, because they're not really needed. But until this kind of process is sourcing, of course we need the shoulders. How can we move our arms without arm muscles and without shoulders? Well, only if you use a different technology. So this is the different sourcing.
Yeah, because I'm noticing like the effect, like that normally I only feel after many minutes of standing meditation, like everything's more open, the joints, the inside of everything. So
right.
The habit to use muscular action gets weaker and weaker.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Certainly the muscles, the habits, the muscles takes a while for them to be convinced. So it's like I said with the shoulders, it's like, oh, okay, I guess I don't have to be doing that work. Like they don't get it right away, but eventually they get it. They start to get it more and more. Now let's take it into some footwork and still working with this relaxing down, releasing down, and pressurizing outward. So again, the belly should be kind of a little bit taut. Eventually we'll get better at having it happening in all directions. As we move our feet, so if you add a little bit more intentional vector down, so it's pressing through the pelvic floor into the legs. Just like what we were doing before with Manucci and Sayuendo, eventually this pressure is buoying the arms out. Like I said, pushing my elbows away from me. It's going in this direction. It's all directions. So, but now we'll focus in this down direction, like that pressure, that steam pressure. We're going to intend it in this direction. So through the pelvic floor to some degree or other into the legs. So that's what's going to be moving my legs. And take time, wait for the pressure to happen. Just like always, what we want to do is not move and try to get it. Take your time. Don't worry about not moving. Lots of patience. I'm going to get whatever I can get with this process, with this principle, as much as I can, and then have that move me. That takes a lot of patience and be willing to wait, willing to pause, and pause longer until I get some sort of sense, oh, I'm being pushed by this, being moved by this. It's much more potent, more powerful than moving out of rote habit. Well, I'm supposed to be moving now, and then trying to get it. That's a very diluted version of it. So pressurize, fill the belly, pressurize down, downward, into the legs. Let that move you. Don't have to use the arms right now. Probably best to focus on down into the legs. That pressurization can move me. Pressurizing down. Pressurizing down. And so for me, I get an experience in the legs and in my movement being very full and grounded, yet light. A lot of times, that combination doesn't usually come together. Sometimes I can feel quite light, where the legs are really light and easy to move, or grounded, solid, rooted. But then there can be a little bit of a sloshiness or a little bit of a heaviness in the footwork. This brings both qualities together, full, substantial, yet completely mobile, just like a balloon that's filled.
Because what I noticed that's different, because this is not, I'm getting taste. In weight transfer, there's no wobble. Like I feel really connected, and then the leg that's unweighted has a buoyancy to it, and that's not my normal. Usually there's some degree of wobble or some degree of little inner tremor.
Nice. So maybe let's spend another half a minute on that to absorb that experience. Enjoy that experience. So it's half allowing and half doing. It's half not doing anything, and it's half intentional doing. So we get better and better at being less muscular about it and setting the intention, and better at allowing it, and we get more effect. That's art. Okay, now why don't we take this into a little bit of rolling, bit of ukemi, along the lines of what you were touching upon a few minutes ago. So let's see here. Let's just do those egg rolls with this feeling, quality, and intention from here. Certainly, it makes me round automatically. I don't have to mechanically think about doing all these things. It rounds me, but we're going to keep this, use that steam pressure, get the steam engine going, and have that be my primary experience and sensation, is this internal pressure in the abdomen and torso. Okay, so now we're going to roll back, roll forward, and come up on one knee, working with this and seeing if we can work with this and coordinate this to help us up. So I feel, and so there's intentional vectors, and this pressure can help me up. And as I go back, notice the tendency as I go back down, notice the tendency to tighten, to shirk in, and try to replace that with this feeling expanding out, pressurizing out. That'll make everything softer, rounder. Pressurize to come up. Pressurize as you meet the ground. Now, for contrast purposes, do the opposite or do normal, where I'm going to have no I'm going to let this go. Come back to a muscular approach and no concept of this, no concept of this at all, and do it with your body. So what I noticed right away is a lot of different segments, a lot of different parts of my body. And I also noticed more of a muscular use of my abdomen to come up, specifically crunching the abdomen in order to come up, as opposed to before it was a more holistic, global, working together everything. And going back and down, I'm aware of my lower leg as a segment. I'm aware of my thigh as a segment, my one side of my hip as a segment, those other pieces.
Yeah.
And so let's go back to turning on the steam engine. If you give it a moment for the pressure to build, give it another moment to transfer our sense of what we are and who we are, moving from a physical segmented identification, to letting myself absorb this new presence, this new identity of this pressurized energy, this pressurized quality, and letting that imbue me. And then let's switch our feet and let the switching of the legs actually come from the pressurization as well. The emanation of that pressure, that even switches my legs for me. Okay. Now, even something like Shiko is motivated completely differently. I open and expand this, pressurize it. And that allows me to come from my hips more, rather than hiking my hip over and coming up. It unifies everything, consolidates everything. Move the intention first, move the expanding pressurized ball first, and the body is moved, or the body follows that pressurization. Again, directing, having a vector going down through the pelvic floor, through the legs, and to the right to the ground. Now, when you come up from that pressurized quality, pressurized down, out and down, come up. Now, just like we did with the hip circles, where that pressurized ball moves us around, walk a few feet and you send your pressurization one direction and have that move you to that turn. So you're walking with this centralized pressurization. You send the pressure to one side for your turn. So what I'm really appreciating with that is when I turn, I'm moving as one centralized unit, in contrast to moving again in segmented parts. A bit of a lean. That literally is like a ball. It just changes its roll, changes the direction of its roll. So I send the pressurized intention through one side, and I moved as a centered, unified sphere. Okay. So let's take that again into a little bit of technique. So, Ikkyo, and before you move, pressurize, fill, extend, vectorize, and have the movement happen because you're just giving a certain vectors to your pressurized ball energy in your abdomen, in your core. Okay, so I'll tell you what, let's do one now that's even a little bit more technique-like in that we'll have footwork and set up. We can actually do this facing the same way. So if we have the left side forward, and it's going to be Ikkyo. So you imagine the person grabbing you here. Okay. So grabbing you like that. And so we're going to do omote, so we're going to go this way. So we're going to do the Minuchi and the Irimi Sugiyashi, and then continue a little further, but all from this open, expanded, expanding, emanating sensation. So as we do our Irimi Sugiyashi and raising Minuchi to move them to their omote, that's all happening from this expansion. Now let's just pause there for a moment. So again, what I get from that, even though I don't have a partner, I can sense what this does for me with a partner. Just as there were segments before doing ukumi or turning, walking and turning, there's a segmentedness when I don't have this embodied fullness. Without this embodied fullness, I can sense where things could break. I don't mean physically break a bone. I mean, alignment can break. There's still segments.
Yep.
And where they can enter into. But when I do it with this emanating fullness, there's no openings. There's no openings to enter into. So here we go. You turn it on. And then Irimi Sugiyashi Minuchi. And then turn the hips for the downward Minuchi. All coming from the expanding, pressurized abdomen. And then we're about to step into the right corner with the right leg. But do that with your intention and your expanding hara first. And that moves you there. And then we're move over with the left foot. Left corner, again, coming from that emanating, expanding spirit. And maybe even kneeling down if you want. And if you're going to kneel down, notice if you're only increase the pressure, especially through the areas where we'll tend to really shirk in and lose it and pull in, you just increase the pressure outward to compensate for that. So let's do that once again. So emanate, move and keep it. Hip turn, drop Minuchi, that's coming from that expanding core. About the step, you send the intention through the abdomen. And then you move that ball, pressurized ball for the next step. And keep that pressurizing going as you go down. Now, just like we did before, let's contrast and compare. Let's pretend we have no concept of that. And let's do it, and we won't try to do it badly. We'll try to do a good Ikkyo. So, we might even be doing it fairly well, but no concept of this. And notice how it feels different and is different. Okay, so no concept of this whatsoever. We're just going to do Ikkyo. So, Irimi Sugiyashi, Minuchi, downward Minuchi, hip turn, step in and down. So, one of the things I noticed with that is I noticed my shape is still okay, and I'm keeping my extension. That's because of training. So all those felt good, actually. What I noticed was more on an energetic quality and feeling. what I noticed is that I was invadable, completely invadable, physically or energetically. So I'll show from the front here on a physical level, Irmisugi Ashi, Minuchi. I've got, extension, elbows away from the body, shoulders down. All this is pretty good. Hip turn, downward Minuchi. Enter in, enter out, drop. On the outside, probably looks pretty good. In terms of the shape, feels fine. But energetically, heart-wise even, it feels very invadable, vulnerable, takeable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I like small things, but like in going down, I felt like if someone had the right ukami, they could counter, like there was a space in my hips where it was like became separate. And so that, like, if I could just picture, someone pushing up at the right angle would be able to change my direction. I didn't have that feeling when this is full, because that wasn't separate, even though of course I'm moving through my hip joint in order to squat and kneel.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so it's creating a different reality by changing the inner reality.
Yeah.
So the outer reality becomes a totally different thing. The same options aren't there for them. And if they try to do this, the same options, it has a different result, different effect.
Yeah.
Changes everything from the inside out. So that's a really good, definition of internal training, internal martial arts. It's coming from, that's the difference right there you explained, right? You're coming from this inside technology, inside methods. It changes what happens on the outside and what can happen on the outside. And when things do happen on the outside, it changes, again, how they happen and the end result of that. So that's the feeling. So, and once you have the feeling, you can take that everywhere you go. You can take that into every technique. And when you lose that feeling quality, it becomes very clear, very obvious. Oh, okay, I'm not there. I'm not doing it. It's not on.
Yeah, I think the thing that my brain will have to wrap itself around is, like, there's a clear feeling just because of the work we've done of it being on. My brain, though, is having a bit of monkey business about, but you can't go into any shape physically, like, because there's this feeling of, the nature of that tone. It's like, but I can't bend that, or I can't, like, it's doing a bunch of pecking around it. Except, of course, we did, right? Like, yeah.
Okay, yes. So, yeah, that's totally a normal supposition of the intellect. And as you said, you discover, oh, actually, I can move and bend. And eventually the mind will get it, just like we said before with the muscles, right? Eventually they get the idea, oh, I can let go. They'll let go of their habit. And it's like, oh, I can actually not have to do this. I can actually let go. Same thing with the mind. You're like, oh, okay. And we've only done a couple repetitions. You do this a number of times, the mind gets it. And again, the mind and this quality start to meld together. So,
but I know for me, this is a really nice application, because what was increasingly getting clear in standing meditation is the release and feeling more of the fascial system of that, as well as the muscular, like that the differentiation between those two was getting stronger just in standing, and the normal habit, right, of keeping everything lifted versus letting it just release into the legs and the ground. But I didn't know what to do with that. It's a palpable sensation, and so what? So this is a really levers off of that. Like, for me, that's very satisfying and a great next thing
And
work on.
eventually, those two get married. The yin and the yang, the dropping will create a filling. Instantly, instantaneously, and proportionately. The more I can release, the more I can drop, the more I can sink, the more I can have that trigger a filling and a completing and a fullness, like directly. So that will develop as well. How about Iruminage? So so if we have, let's say, the right side forward, and it's going to be Aihanmi again, or Kosadori. So then we're here, yeah. So we're going to step here to their ura as we do Minuchi. So this is, I believe it would be 7th cue in our program on the mat, 7th cue. So relax, hang out, let the feet enter the ground, allow the belly to fill, expand, let that emanate through the rest of the body, right to the peripherals. Then whenever you're ready, you do that hip turn to the right, which sends the elbows forward and out. Left hand towards their lower back. Doesn't matter if it gets there or not. Expanding this turns the hips, which makes the step, and continue to expand and fill to turn the hips the other direction. And we enter in underneath and behind our partner. All the while pressurized by the steam pressure, this expanding fullness. So you open and turn it on first, and then have the movement come from the intentional vectors of that expanding ball. Even the step happens because of it. Let's try a little bit on the other side. Expanding, then moving, expanding, then turning. Of course, it'll tend to make the arms equal, right? Even though they go in somewhat different directions. It makes everything equal. And rather than my arm or arms being separate from my body, the arms are actually truly an extension of my core. Okay, now let's play with this a bit. Let's experiment with this. Let's say we have a partner, we have an actual partner, and we get part way, and we'll play with where that place is, because it can be any point. But the partner resists at some point. So if I'm a partner, for example, the technique would look like this. If I'm uke, eventually I'm down. So at some point, the partner will say straight arm or resist. So let's maybe try this together to start with anyway. So if we're here, pressurize, open, expand, fill, release, emanate. And so it starts off here, okay. Starts off here, okay. We make our step. We start to raise that left arm, which is actually expanding all directions. And then they straight arm here. And just experiment what would happen, what you would do, or what would happen. You're giving a straight arm and resisting into that arm. And try that again on your own. Maybe the same place for now. You meet that resistance and see if you can imagine and feel what happens. Okay, so any comments or feedback on that? What would happen? What would tend to happen? What you feel would occur if you were to meet that resistance?
Yeah, I guess in the imagining with the feeling, if this is resistant, that I would just keep expanding. And so this really, was sinking down as this continued just on its trajectory. At a certain point, that their balance would break.
Yeah,
Because it's not in any way engaging their resistance. It's just,
Right.
like this sort of,
right.
it's just continuing.
It's just continuing.
Yeah.
Yeah. And at some point, so because you're not fighting and pushing in, continue to expand, at some point they get out of their zone of leverage.
Right.
Now, you say you just keep on going, and so now they don't have that
Yeah.
that
There's
lead.
no mechanical advantage they have anymore.
Yes.
Yeah.
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 Exactly. So
Yeah.
you basically continue expanding, and of course we get better at noticing if I'm expanding and creating an opening. So we will fill that. So that's purely sensing and intentional. Oh, create an opening. They can come in with an elbow or maybe a knee, and you just fill that with the same pressure. Fill that
Yeah.
more. And then one other little another aspect of that, which is a little bit more yang and a little bit more active. So if I do that from here, you can see. So let's say I get stopped at that same place. I turn a little bit, so maybe it's easier to see. And then, like you say, let's say I meet with resistance here. And as you say, just keep expanding. And basically you expand beyond them, over them, and you end up just flowing past and beyond them. But another element here, another direction, another dimension here. If I really continue to expand here, energetically and physically, that actually impinges on them. That's an irimi that collapses their physical structure. So I don't know if that can be pictured very well. So I'm here. So we have the expanding out and beyond, but I can also expand this expanding core very physically into them.
Okay.
And that's buckling their structure physically and continue to go beyond.
Right.
More directly through as well.
Like an energetic hip check, except you're not.
It's a hip check, but at a distance.
Yeah.
But at this point, I'm feeling it not as my hip, I'm feeling it as my belly.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, once I got here, maybe that would be more a hip check.
Yeah.
So it might be worthy of actually trying to activate that and try that specifically. So here we go here. Open, turn on, expand. And you're turning the hip and stepping because you're only expanding more from the abdomen. That step is made because you're filling, you're expanding. The balloon is inflating, so that's why the step occurred. And then maybe about here, they're straight arming again. Now, let's emphasize, so let's do the expansion beyond and past them a little bit, just a little bit to make sure that, yeah, we're continuing to do that. But now come back really physically to your abdomen and push your abdomen out, ideally from the inside out. So you're doing it from inner expansion, not just by muscularly pushing it out, but really expand your abdomen. What I might say to someone who's, imagine you're going to push your belly button into them.
Mm-hmm.
Quite physical. And then you might be able to tell, imagine or remember if you had a partner, that's actually pushing into them, into their physical center. And then if I keep that expansion beyond them too, those are two fronts.
Mm-hmm. And it's like, it feels like I would have to take over their space eventually, like in letting this come out. Eventually I'd have to come behind it.
Physically moving.
Yeah, like that there's in this movement, I mean, I can forestall that, but the continuation of this continuation is that at some point I have to physically hold myself back from moving.
Okay, let's touch upon that just for a moment, because this is interesting. So yes, for sure, that, like you said, you can forestall this physical movement for a bit, but eventually, because there's so much energetic flow and intentional vectoring and, expanding, that you're going to kind of have to step. Yeah, that's right. And yes, absolutely. And so that talks about, that strong intentional vector, and that's all good. This is going slightly further now, though.
Okay.
Now, what if well, eventually you'll choose not to step, or you could choose not to step. But let me phrase it, you'll choose this, but let me phrase it this way. What happens if well, let me say it this way. What happens if you choose not to step? If somehow you're able to restrain yourself enough.
Yeah. I mean, then it just gets bigger.
They go down without you stepping.
Right.
So eventually you don't have to do anything. You don't have to move here. This is why you get techniques where they're not doing this big movement. They're not going down to them. They're not moving into them. So all we're doing now is you just keep it going even stronger and stronger. And you find out you don't actually have to move. Yes, you're compelled to move. That's good. But eventually you can choose to do it right on the spot, so you can do it without moving.
Right.
Certainly before then, you're compelled to move, and that is a good, powerful thing.
Right.
But again, back to this idea, eventually, you don't have to do the basic step. You don't have to do basic shape. You don't have to do basic anything, because you have it on the inside. So I could go here, for example, and I'm doing everything so big and so powerful and expansive, it literally pulls me forward. I mean, like I said, just before this, is the step here happens because I'm expanding, filling, it forces the step, right? And you're just talking about the last step, the second step. You're into it, you're compelled into it. Yeah. So what happens when you have a bit more dexterity with this, a bit more familiarity with this, is you're not going to step, but you keep pouring it on. So now even though they're way down there, they're barely touching me, maybe they're like 3/4 thrown, and it's just their edge of their hand touching my fingers. I should step in to follow them. Yes, at basic, but actually I can keep this connection even though they're like here. We're barely touching, and then you continue without stepping. You can have the same throw without physical stepping in. That's the next thing.
Yeah.
It all comes from the internal.
Yeah.
Feeling.
And then this territory, of the throws, the things happening without really touching.
Yeah.
Because you're touching them a different way.
Yes.
Okay.
And why maybe a slight step before that is where you're just barely touching hands or just touching fingertip to fingertip. Well, that's cooperative. Not necessarily.
Yeah. It looks cooperative. Yes. It doesn't feel it.
So all this mass and all this power here, it can go to the smallest point, right to the peripherals. It's connected mass. It's Tai Chi, it's palm, right? This is palm. So let's come back to just standing. And so again, I experience this as hydraulics. This pressurization is what moves my joints and moves my body and moves the peripherals. It's that inner pressurization. Hydraulics is fluid pressure. Steam is gas pressure. So we're building up this capacity to internally pressurize. So I call it hydraulics or steam pressure. But the other side of the equation is that we cultivate the body, become a better and better vessel, as we say in Tai Chi. Transparent body, empty vessel. Just like a steam engine, if we go back to this idea of a steam engine, that steam engine, imagine if we have either a really old steam engine that's gotten full of rust and and debris, or just something that was very crudely made. It's not even a cylinder, not even a sphere. It's just kind of, it's not, it's, there's a lot of stuff in there. It's not going to be as good a steam engine as one that is spherical or empty and nicely shaped and strong material. The same with just regular liquid pressurization, liquid hydraulics. If the casings, not just the metal casings, but also the rubber gaskets and seams, if those aren't refined and the best materials, that hydraulic system or that steam engine is not going to be as good as it can be. So half of it is, what kind of equipment do we have? Do we have the finest equipment? Have we refined that metal of the steam engine so it's thin and light, but super strong, stronger than anything that was heavier generations before, like old generational steel. Now it's very thin, but even stronger. So that's us refining our body. And then there's the building up of steam itself, the building of the pressure itself, which is the ki or the chi and the mind aspect. So we have the body that needs to be refined, as well as the mind and the ki to develop together and synchronize together. So as we stand here, we can work on that pressurization, or as we talk about syncing the chi, syncing the mind, directing the ki, and eventually, poof, that inflates things, that opens things. And the more I run the intention, the more I stream the intention, the more it fills. Until I'm, it's just, you're filled with this pleasantness, this very pleasant, therapeutic, stimulating fullness. And the more I can rely on it to move, the more I can rely on it to stand me. I don't have to stand, but if I do this work, it stands me. Then the more and more I'm leaving behind the old technology and the old crude habits and the old crude engine that's all dented and very heavy, crude metal. The more I leave that behind, that technology behind, and the more I can rely on a new technology. So keys or triggers are syncing. That's why I often say weight under side. That's a principle that's often used in Aikido. In Tai Chi, we say sinking chi. It's that downness, downing. But it takes a while because when people think of down, physically they tend to collapse, and mentally it's a down, it's a downer. It's a downer. But once you connect to the rebound, to the echo, to the return wave, the downing only leads to more and more brightness. Downing directly feeds more and more upness, lightness, openness, clarity, and brilliance. But it takes a while for that synergy to occur. It's definitely a long process, a mining process. So more and more it becomes I do less and less. And more it becomes simply an intentional thing, a feeling thing. And then big physical response and effect. And just like you mentioned that the mind will tend to do its own thing and not believe it or buy into it. In your case, you're saying, well, I won't be able to really bend or be agile, flexible like this. That's a big long-term thing. That's a long-term thing. And like I mentioned, the shoulders, it took them a while to realize they don't have to be doing anything. This is an insidious thing, a long-term thing. There's going to be layer upon layer of how much will I let go and trust in this? How much will I let go and allow it to do the work? how much can I let the new technology take over? It is like literally a choice every millisecond. Because every millisecond, every millimeter is another potential place where we'll stay. Like climbing Mount Everest. Every step is another place where some people have died here, some people have died here, some people made it this far, some people made it this far, and there is no millimeter where there aren't people that stopped.
Right.
And so it's a continual challenge and continual temptation that, oh, this is really neat. Okay, I feel what he's talking about. I'm actually being stood. I'm being stood up. I'm being held up. I'm being in movement. I can actually be propelled by this steam pressure, steam energy. This is quite cool. Feels really good. Now, of course, the big problem is that it takes a lot of mental stamina at first. So that's something that has to be built. But even when that's being built for a good level, how much, when you start to really tune into this, it is wild. It is like you're not doing anything. It is like you're freed, you're emptied, and it's totally a relocating your sense of who and what you are. It's a total reorienting. And at first, there is no orientation at all. And so people will, again, shirk back from that to what they know.
Yeah.
And this is even an intellectual thing. It's a bodily, sensational survival thing back to how I sense myself. So how far a person goes with this, it's largely dependent upon that kind of thing. Because it gets to the point where it's like, it's very, very, so a very simple way of putting it is you get to places and times where it's, oh, this is cool. This is neat. I'm gonna do more of this. And then the next second is like, okay, that's enough. From cool to scary, or cool to weird, or cool to, I don't understand what's happening, or what this is.
Yes.
So that's a constant experience along this path.
Yeah.
So let's just then go into misogi, or a little bit of breathing from this activity, from this technology. So filling, inflating, emptying to become full. And I'll just kind of let you do your own thing. And just doing a little bit of so-called breathing. But now we know it's not, breathing and moving our arms. Body is filled. The arms are filled and buoyed and inflated into movement. And the less I do with my body or my muscles, the more that can be done with the internals. And then slowly keeping your pressurization. You don't have the time to breathing at all. We're going to slowly press the hands towards the abdomen, but don't lose any of the pressurization. In fact, increase it, and both physically in the belly and the emanating energy because of it. And you might get to a place where it's hard to get the hands closer to the body. And then when you get to a place where it's very difficult to get the hands towards the body anymore, just let them slide down. Keep the fullness though, not leaving the fullness, so that slide down towards down. And you can see, I'm just seeing here in the screen how far my arms are away from my body. I'm not doing that. I can't get my arms any closer. If I keep this feeling, if I keep the energy, I can't get the arms any closer. Now, as we go down into Seiza, bow out, just like as we got up from Seiza, using the ground, we'll do the same process, not leaving the ground as we go down towards the ground, and in fact, keeping the pressure. We might even increase the pressure down through the pelvic floor into the legs. So you can take your time, but as I start to go down, I just continue with the pressurization and maybe direct it even more so downward. So I never have to lose it. Everything is an opportunity to work it. And we'll bow out. Domo arigato gozaimasu.
どうもありがとうございました。So I feel like I need to